lot of questions. Joining us tonight, Dr. Christine Damiani will be introducing tonight's speaker. She has served on our Conservation Advisory Committee since 2012, I think. And she's been really invaluable to our team. She directs the butterfly conservation program here at Sequoia Park Zoo and has been working to save endangered silver spot butterflies from extinction through captive rearing program and habitat restoration work. As shared in the slideshow, the next butterfly habitat restoration broom bash is coming up on the 30th. So hopefully she'll maybe share with us about that too. Do you want to come up, Chris, to introduce Clint?
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wow. What a great audience tonight. And hello, online audience. Like Ruth said, I run the butterfly conservation program here at the zoo. And I raise caterpillars for a living. And I'm thrilled to introduce my friend and colleague, Clint Pogue, tonight, because Clint is the reason that I have this amazing job. I met Clint around 2017 when he had just been hired by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the Arcata office. Clint had done his master's project at Central Michigan University on the habitat requirements of the Poweshiek skipperling butterfly. And he was taking on the role of the recovery lead for our local rare butterflies. So because I was on the zoo's Conservation Advisory Committee, I was working with Clint to put together our annual Scotch broom bash for the butterflies to restore Oregon silver spot butterfly habitat up in Delaware County. And so I mentioned to Clint once that if the declining California populations of the Oregon silver spot butterfly were going to need to be supplemented with zoo-reared butterflies like the Oregon populations, it made sense to have those butterflies reared at Sequoia Park Zoo because we're so much closer to Delaware County than the Oregon Zoo in Portland. And the next thing you know, within a few months, Clint had wrangled the funding to get the captive rearing program started here at the zoo. So working with Clint on the recovery teams for both the Oregon silver spot and barren silver spot butterflies has been an absolute pleasure. I love that Clint is not content to just monitor and maintain the status quo of the butterflies under his watch, but he's very good at actively strategizing how to really get these butterflies off the endangered species list. And he's not afraid to make the big moves to get that done. Clint also recognizes that it takes a village to save a species. And one of the themes that he has come back to time and again during our conversations is the value of community. Human communities, natural communities, and that we're all really the same community and we need to be kind to each other and help each other out. I see this in the way that he co-organizes the broom bash with me every year. I see this in the way that he founded a local chapter of the North American Butterfly Association, so all of us butterfly nerds can hang out together. I see this in the sense of collaboration and camaraderie that he has instilled in both of the silver spot working groups that he leads, which is what makes us so effective at working together as a team to achieve our conservation goals. I think you're going to see this in his talk tonight, which I am so excited to hear. Elfin Magic, the power of curious communities in butterfly conservation. Clint.
Thanks so much, Chris. All that means a lot. I really appreciate our friendship and partnership. I'm so excited that everybody is here tonight. I love talking about butterflies. They've given me so much beauty, inspiration, and purpose. And I'm excited to share their story, help get you excited, and maybe show you ways that you can do great things for your butterfly communities and your human communities. And like Chris said, what's the difference? So first, we're going to start off with some butterfly basics, talk about status of butterflies, what it's like to study a rare one, talk about this idea of community-centered conservation, and look at an example of a community partnership. We'll talk about community actions that we can take together. And last, I'll give you a bunch of resources that you can use so you can take some steps if you so desire. First up, butterfly basics. Is that a butterfly or a moth? That's the #1 question that I get working with butterflies. And the answer is not quite so straightforward, actually. So a butterfly is in the order Lepidoptera. Breaking that word down, lepid is scale, ptera is wing, scale wing. You can see on this close-up of a peacock butterfly, these are individual scales overlapping like shingles on the wing. If you've ever touched a butterfly or a moth and gotten that dust on your fingers, it's those scales that has rubbed off on your skin. So I would implore you, please don't touch them because they can't regrow these scales. And so everything in Lepidoptera, that includes butterflies and moths. Moths, basically, my opinion, everything in Lepidoptera is a moth. Butterflies are just a unique kind of one because there's a lot of different families within the order, and butterflies are in their own suborder, Rhopalocera, which means clubhorn. There's no great rule of thumb to tell a butterfly from a moth, but I'd say the best one is looking at their antennae. Butterflies, Rhopalocera, clubhorn, that means because their antenna is filamentous, it's a strand until it gets to the end where it's bulbous, like a club. And butterflies have that clubbed antenna at the end. Skippers in particular have a little hook on there, so if you get confused, that's a good way to tell. But moths, they tend to either have just a purely filamentous antenna, so just a string, or what we call plumose, the really feathery ones. And those are the males, and they use those as scent organs to find the females. Butterflies are in 6 families: Papilonidae, Nymphalidae, Lycaenidae, Pieridae, Rhionidae, Hesperidae, and Hedylidae. Amongst these 6 families, there's somewhere between 17.5 and 20,000 species. But in the rest of Lepidoptera, there's over 180,000 species. So butterflies, really, they only make up a 1/9 at most of the order Lepidoptera. Butterflies, this is one thing I love about them the most, they're so surprising. So, monarchs, they're a really great ambassador for butterfly conservation. They're an iconic insect whenever we don't have all that many of them. They're big, they're orange, they're beautiful. They have this amazing multi-generational migratory life history. And that gets people thinking that that's how most butterflies live their life history. When the truth of the matter is, most butterflies are not migratory. Most butterflies, they spend their entire life in an area that you can see from standing in one spot. And so that's one of the things I love to sort of like hook people with, is like people are interested in butterflies and people like to be surprised. And so there's a lot of great surprising things about butterflies. This next one blew my mind when I learned it. They actually are able to maintain memory throughout their metamorphosis process. So the butterfly life cycle starts as an egg that hatches into a larva. Those larvae develop in stages until they pupate, and then from the pupa, they eventually turn into a butterfly. From the larva, pupa, and adult stage, that pupa stage is really unique because it's the non-feeding stage. Some people like to think that, it's the caterpillar's in the pupa, but that's not really the case. It is the pupa. And on the inside, it's completely liquefied except for these regions of cells called imaginal discs. So the way that we know that through this amazing process of caterpillar to pupa to butterfly that they're able to maintain memories is there's an experiment with moths where they expose these moths to the smell of acetone, and then they take some of them and give them a negative stimulus. In this case, a light electric shock, something that's not fun, but not going to harm them. So we know that we have this one group that's been exposed to the acetone and the electric shock, and then another group that's just been exposed to the acetone. After they've pupated and emerged as adults, they're allowed to smell that acetone again. And the ones that got the shock, they're like, no, we do not like that. So we see that they're able to remember that negative association from whenever they were larvae all the way through to adults. There's also ant symbioses, which can be surprising. In the Lycaenid group, that's the gossamer wings, the blues, the elfins, the hair streaks. There's times where the larvae actually excrete this sweet bit of liquid called honeydew. and the ants go crazy for it. They just swarm around the caterpillar and eat that honeydew. But the ants, they're, if you've ever been around ants, they can be quite militant. An ant bite does not feel very good. So this is a great protection for the larva. But sometimes those caterpillars can turn carnivorous. In one example of this symbiosis in Poland, there's a blue butterfly where the ants get the larva, bring it down into the ant mound. So what's better protection than bodyguards in a bunker? But then as the caterpillar develops to the very end, it turns on the ants and eats the ants before pupating and escaping the ant mound. So these are just some things that are surprising about butterflies, but they're surprising me all the time. And I work with them daily. So they really make my life full of joy, full of surprises. But let's talk a little bit about the status of the butterflies. Are they all in decline? Well, it's kind of a complicated answer, but in many ways, yes. Here we have some data from the UK. And looking at that gray line, these are our actual counts of butterflies in the UK. And it can be really hard to get a good handle on a butterfly status or population or community over time, because insects are known for their boom and bust population cycles. So you really need to look long term. And over this, we do see a continuous decline in butterflies in the UK. That's not the only place. Looking in Singapore, since 1854, 46% of butterfly species have been extirpated from Singapore. That's just like heartbreaking for me. In the European Union, the Grassland Butterfly Indicator, which is a combination of butterfly abundance and diversity, so it's sort of an index, that's declined 36% since 1990, all the way across Europe, and 32% across the EU member states. But looking a little bit closer to home, in Ohio, butterflies in general have declined 33% over the last 20 years. And right here on the West Coast, Matt Forrester and Art Shapiro see that Western butterflies have declined 1.6% annually over 40 years. So that for the past 40 years, they've been in decline, reducing 1.6% year after year after year. So if you start at 100 and then go down to 98.4 and then down to 96.8 and then so on and so forth, you can see over 40 years that adds up substantially. But let's talk a little bit about what we have going on in our backyard. Humboldt County is actually a pretty amazing place for butterflies. There's over 70 species in our county, which is a fairly large county, but that's a pretty large number too, when you're looking at individual species, just of butterflies, not to include all the moths that we have here too. There's some really amazing hotspots. Horse Mountain, I'd say that's the crown jewel for butterfly diversity and abundance. If you want to see some great butterflies, it'd be hard to beat July at Horse Mountain. Lax Creek is a BLM property that is really well managed. There's amazing butterflies. There's even a population of gray marble out there, which there's not very many of those in general. So really cool spot. Bald Hills Road, also an amazing spot to see butterflies. Those prairies, they're great butterfly habitat, but also around town is really nice too. We have purplish coppers in abundance around here. Purplish coppers, its caterpillars eat rumex, this wetland plant, because we've done a pretty good job around here of maintaining some of our wetlands. In the Bay Area, that's not the case. Purplish coppers are extremely hard to find. Same story with field crescent. Here, it's almost unremarkable to see one of these butterflies, but in the Bay Area, many populations wink out year after year. And we have a few unique butterflies that are basically just ours too. Here's the redwood white. This picture was taken just in the McKay Community Forest. So start getting out there in a couple weeks, maybe right now, and you can see these. Some people confuse them for the cabbage white, which is a European pest. But if you see the black scaling venation on this one, you can tell that it's different. This is a subspecies of the margined white called the redwood white. So it's Pieris marginalis sequoiae. And we have this somewhat in Dunlort County, and then in the national park, and then here in the McKay Community Forest. This is a local butterfly that's basically just ours to enjoy. So there's a lot of cool butterfly diversity here. This isn't the only cool one. But here's some examples of some butterflies that aren't doing so well. The monarch, This is the iconic butterfly, and many people know that monarchs, both the eastern population and the western population, have been in substantial decline. That's a terrible news. It's a great way to get people interested in butterflies and get people recognizing that there's issues with butterfly populations. But also, Poweshiek skipperling. Not a lot of people know about this butterfly. I studied it for a few years. Whenever I showed up for this job, I was like, this was like the only butterfly that I really knew much about because I spent 3 years studying it. This butterfly is an obligate to the tallgrass prairies of the Midwest, from Manitoba down to Illinois, over to Michigan, a huge expanse of area that used to be covered by tallgrass prairies. By the time that I started to work with it, there were less than 100 in existence. This species is listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, and through captive rearing and propagation, we've actually been able to bring this butterfly back. But what's, I think, key in this story and understanding that it's worth preserving the common ones now. My mentor, while I was working in Michigan, Dave Cuthrell, he was surveying butterflies in Nebraska, looking for what he thought was going to be a rare butterfly called the Dorcas copper. And he didn't even note the Poweshiek skipperlings because they were, in his words, as common as robins. So this butterfly that used to be totally unremarkable to see now exists in less than 5 places on the planet. Also, a local butterfly that I work with Chris a lot, the Barren silver spot. This butterfly has a very narrow range, just basically the southern half of Mendocino County, a little bit of Sonoma County within 1 mile of the coast. This butterfly has unique habitat requirements and a small limited range. So looking at these, we have a breadth of, one butterfly that's multi-generational, migratory, 2 major populations, one that used to be super common throughout the entire upper Midwest, and one just found in small areas locally. So butterfly conservation really needs to be at the appropriate scale. As we look to conserve our butterflies, oftentimes we have a lot of questions when we get started. And if we're studying butterflies, it's because they're rare. And whenever they're rare, impacts can be really large, even a small one. So how do we balance that research with protection? And I'm going to be talking about our first elfin of the day, the case of the seaside hoary elfin. This is a spring flyer. It's called the seaside hoary elfin because of this sort of gray silver streak on the hind wing. That's the hoary part of it. There's 3 known populations of this butterfly in the world, 2 in Oregon, 1 in Del Norte County, and that's the largest one that we have here in Del Norte County. Its larvae, its caterpillars, eat kinnick, Arctostaphylos uva ursi, or bearberry. But as we have been looking at these populations over time, we've seen substantial declines in each of those 3 populations, but we don't really know why. Are the pines shading out the habitat? Is the plant not putting off enough growth for the caterpillars to eat? We really don't know. So we have to, there we go, find a way to answer some of these questions. And to answer them, it's kind of a balancing act. Declining species, they can be at imminent extinction risk. So we have to answer these questions basically yesterday. These rare butterflies often occur in sensitive and remote habitats. So being out there, we need to make sure that we're not impacting that habitat. And sometimes it takes a long time to get there. So it can be hard to collect a lot of data whenever there's a lot of travel time involved. Also, being out there, just as human researchers, we can impact the data that way. We're focused on a butterfly. That jay in the tree also recognizes what we're doing. So there's definitely some balance that we need to have whenever we're interfacing with these butterflies to make sure that we're not studying them to death. These studies need careful planning, timing, logistics, permits, but also all this data that we're collecting on these rare butterflies might be for a declining population. So we really need to understand what that data means. Are we studying what an unhealthy population needs? And so we really need to contextualize that and think about when we're studying rare butterflies, really, what are we seeing? But we can use other aspects to answer some of these questions for us. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a community partnership that was born around just over a year ago. To answer some questions that we have about seaside hoary elfin, we turn to another elfin, the brown elfin, and this one truly common as a robin. It has a really similar life history to the seaside hoary elfin. It's a spring flyer. Its larvae eat kinnick. It's in the same genus, but this one, much more widespread, much more abundant, and it's close by. So to tell you more about brown elfin research, I'd like to welcome my colleagues and friends, Aiden Jack Murphy and Nice Sanchez.
This is the remote. All right, okay. Oh, we're in business. Yes, hello, my name's Aiden Jack, and this is Bernice.
Berenice Sanchez. I also go by Nice.
Yeah. And so about a year ago, we set out to understand if kinnick is growing, and if we could relate that growth to the abundance of brown elfins at the Millel Dunes here in Humboldt County. And so, is there more growth equals more butterflies? That's the question.
That is the question. So after getting out there and collecting data for hours and hours, what we found was that the kinnick plant and the plots that we studied that showed the most growth were also showing the most butterfly abundance. So this led us to believe that there was a slight correlation between the presence of, or the growth of the kinnick inflorescence and the presence of brown elfin butterflies. Am I missing anything?
All right, good to go.
So one thing I wanted to go ahead and talk to you guys about was my experience working on this project. When I first started this capstone project, I gotta be honest, I would see the butterflies flying around and I'd be like, oh, that's a cute butterfly. Oh, that's really nice. But the more that I got to work with them, the more time that I spent looking at these plants that were hosting these larvae that I didn't even get to see at the time, the closer I got to their time of emergence and I saw those changes on the plants, how they grew, when we started to see herbivory, that was really nice. And you were like, wow, I don't see them, but they're here, they're eating. They're the chrysalis that we found in one of the pictures that you're going to show. So all the signs were there. And then we went out on one day with Clint where we started actually looking at butterfly, we were doing butterfly surveys and getting to catch them and to see them and to see the iridescence in their wings and their little faces. I cannot tell you how amazing that was. So one thing I would love to encourage everyone to do is to get out there, get to know your beautiful neighbors, sometimes just going out and spending some time in the sun and getting close to them is all it takes to fall in love and to get a new love that emerges from this connection. On to you.
Yeah, come join us at NABA sometime.
I know.
Dip your toes in. So this is the chrysalis that Nice was just speaking of. We're unsure what that was.
Yeah.
But interesting, yeah, we observed like 4% herbivory. Interestingly, 5% of these inflorescences did go missing over time. But we did confirm that growth is actually occurring. Over a 6-week period, we observed an average growth of about 2.1 millimeters with a range in like a maximum of about 10 millimeters over a 6-week period. So you can see this is the development of the inflorescence over time. And so the idea is that if we track the growth of the inflorescence, this flower, this is something that we can more easily measure. We can also see the growth of new leaves over time. And these new leaves are tender, they don't have that cuticle, and so this is what the caterpillars like to munch on. And so by seeing that the inflorescences are growing over time, we are seeing that there's food available for the caterpillars, the brown elfins.
Kind of peek behind you, sorry.
Yeah. And so we even actually got to observe 2 of these elfins mating. And so that was really fascinating. And so like this experience really also kind of changed my perspective of butterflies too. I feel like the way we talk about them, we often talk about them as like victims of like the Anthropocene era, how they're in decline. But we also need to remember that ecosystems don't just support butterflies, but butterflies are heroes helping support the ecosystem as well. And so they bring pollen from elsewhere, increasing genetic diversity of native vegetation, helping that vegetation adapt to climate change. And with that, we'll take it back to Clint. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both so much. Aiden, Jack, and niece were part of a Cal Poly Humboldt senior capstone program that I was able to work with Dr. Allison O'Dowd to start. We've continued that program into this year to answer more questions about Kinnick and brown elfin, stuff that I hope to continue to be able to use into the future and keep that program going. Specifically, under this umbrella of community-centered butterfly conservation, how can we help our neighbors? So this idea really kind of has 4 pillars. First, it starts with community engagement. That's getting out, seeing your neighbors, being active in the community and talking to people. And when you do that, getting out, I think you're going to realize that there's a lot of people that have interest in butterflies. There's a lot of public interest. And so we can leverage that public interest against this non-migratory nature of many butterflies, get people to recognize that there's lots of things that they can do for the butterflies that are their neighbors, talking to your neighbors about your neighbor butterflies. And whenever you do that and come together as a community, you can have a large scale of impact. So what this idea does is it builds community amongst neighbors to help keep the common things common. You know, talking about the rare butterflies, they're often off somewhere else and people are like, oh, what can I do to help the barren silver spot? Or what can I do to help coastal greenish blue butterfly? And it can be a little disheartening to be like, well, it's kind of hard unless you have property on which they already occur. But the common butterflies, you'll most certainly have some in your backyard. And there's things that you can do for them now, keeping the common things common so that we can avert the next Poweshiek skipperling situation. Also, we'll blur the lines between our human communities and natural communities. To me, this is something of utmost importance because that's how we ultimately fulfill humanity's ecological role on the landscape. This is not a new idea. This is not my idea. Indigenous cultures have been implementing this since time immemorial to make sure that, we're part of the ecosystem. We're doing things that, needs, cultural burning. That's an important part that humans have been bringing onto the landscape. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these pillars. Community engagement, that's knowing and relating to the community. Getting out, meeting your neighbors, talking to them, finding mutual interest. Also, if you're serving it as an ambassador in your community, having stepping stones for engagement. Sometimes people want to take step 1, but they don't know where to go. Other times, people have taken that first step, but don't know where to go next. So having that steps 1, 2, 3, 597 ready to go in your pocket to help people will help give them a path to find what can they do to help engage in their community whenever it comes to butterfly conservation. And in that way, you're building partnerships and being a community asset. Also, it's very important that we provide equitable access. Butterflies are for everybody. Butterflies are for our people in the cities. Butterflies are for our people that can't get out of the house. Butterflies should be available to be appreciated by everyone. So it's important that we provide equitable access and do things where people can enjoy butterflies from wherever they have their perspective. And going on with this, ensuring everyone feels safe and welcome, because as I said before, butterflies are for everybody. There's a lot of public interest in butterflies. I mean, I talk to a lot of people a lot of time about it, and I'm almost always met with lots of enthusiasm. And people want to help, Sometimes people are like, oh, how can I help? Whenever I'm talking about these rare butterflies. And so really, I'm trying to focus that into what can we do together in our backyards. And community events, I think this is a great way to get people excited. Chris and I were at Pollinator Week last year. It was really fun engaging with people as they came by at the farmers market and talking to them about butterflies. Also, scientific and educational talks. What do you think I'm doing right now? And volunteer events. Going to put in another plug in for the Scotch Broom Bash. I think I got a couple more plugs in this talk too. March 30th, April 13th is the rain date. Please contact me or Chris if you're interested in coming to help out. We'll be doing this, exactly what Race is doing right here, removing Scotch broom from Oregon silver spot, coastal greenish blue, Yontucket ringlet, and seaside hoary elephant habitat. We can take the non-migratory life history of most butterflies and leverage that to getting good community conservation done. People coming out of the pandemic have been clamoring for community. You know, they want to interact with their neighbors and they want to help their neighbors, and their neighbor butterflies, definitely, let's come together and work together to do good things for them. These butterflies, most of them have small geographic distributions with limited dispersal capability. So having that, you know, working in your backyard, you're actually going to have a more direct impact on the critters that spend their whole year just a few feet away, that sleep just a few feet away from where you do. And there's lots of different butterflies that live in our area. So you have a multi-species benefit helping out your neighbors. But with that limited geographic area, with a high concentration of resources, we're going to have a large scale of impact on this. You know, by putting forth our effort on everything, everywhere, it gets diluted. But by having focus, we can make a substantial impact. People can make a difference in their backyards, and neighbors that have met through community engagement can come together and be like, hey, I'm planting such and such in my backyard. Oh, I'm interested in that too. And then they can come together and effectively create a doubly large patch of whatever plant they're planting for the caterpillars or butterflies. So I like this idea of stepping stones. And so we're talking about the brown elfin. That, you know, that's a butterfly that's common, and we know it to be common, and we know it to be a generalist. Looking at iNaturalist was a great way to sort of see what butterflies are around you. We see that there's populations out here on the dunes, and then one over of Jacoby Creek. So these two butterflies, these two populations, they don't interact with each other. It's highly unlikely because very small, and the smaller the butterfly, often the less it can fly. So what I think would be really cool is to get people interested in this common butterfly that's in our backyards, planting kinnick in our backyards to potentially connect these two areas, eventually, you know, turning Arcata into a butterfly town. There was a couple things I wanted to note. One, kinnick is a great plant to try this with because it's hardy and easy to grow, and it's already a very popular ground cover that people use. But in that popularity, I see out and about in towns, some of it is native, some of it is a cultivar. I'm not sure if the larva can eat the cultivar or not. So if you're interested in doing that, highly recommend you get your sources from local native plant sources. Samara, California Native Plant Society, native plant sales, these are good places to get native plants. But also, kinnick has medicinal uses that you can look into if that's your thing. So we'll talk about community action. How do we actually blur these lines between our human communities and natural communities? One, making space. And that starts with planting food. Talking about the kinnick, that's food for the caterpillars, for the brown elfin. So plant it, and that will maybe encourage them to show up. And here I'm plugging the California Native Plant Society plant sale. I think that's May 4th and 5th at Freshwater Farms. And if you're so inclined, may I suggest kinnick would be a good option. Also, this one's super easy and harkens back to the very first of these that I ever came to. I was here with my friend Jenny Hutchinson seeing Dr. Mike Nestler's talk on bees. And one of the biggest takeaways from that was just let your yard grow, you know? So this is an easy one to do. You can you can nap while you do this one. It's super easy. So just let places in your yard get long. It's good for all kinds of insects, not just butterflies. And I've been talking about Lepidoptera. You know, moths are in that group too, the butterfly. You know, if you're outside and you have outdoor lights, consider turning them off or finding ways to angle them down so that you're only getting light where you need them. So the reason that this is important is because moths use the moon for navigation. And typically, whenever a moth is flying along and it sees a big bright light, that's really not going to move much in the moth's perspective. It's going to be pretty stationary. But being a light bulb, it can't fly to the moon, but it can fly to your light bulb, and that gets extremely confusing for the moth. So I would say this is another thing that you can do to do good things for Lepidoptera. Also, getting active. You can get out and collect data. I was mentioning iNaturalist earlier. It's an app. You can download that app. You see a butterfly, take a pic. This data is going to be important. As we see our common butterflies potentially decline, having this data and community source data is going to be essential in knowing when that might occur. So you can document your findings at NABA.org. That's North American Butterfly Association.org. You can look for the spot that says butterflies I've seen. That's a big data sheet, but definitely really good for submitting your data, or iNaturalist. And if you get a good pic, that's a really good way. It can even help you identify the butterfly. Also, I might suggest adding your observation to the NABA Redwood project. We're trying to keep tabs on our butterflies in the area. You can advocate for your local butterflies at public meetings. If there's a new community building being built, you can show up and be like, hey, maybe we should consider putting native plants in the landscaping. If you own a business and you have landscaping outside, you can put native plants there. But definitely there's ways to show up for butterflies. And that includes volunteering at Scotch Broom Bash on March 30th. Send Chris an email here if you're interested, or find a way to contact us. I'd be more than happy to share my contact information as well. Also, join a club. We started the North American Butterfly Association Redwood chapter almost a year ago. We've been having butterfly field trips ever since, just getting out, trying to appreciate the butterfly diversity that we have around here. And this is from our first field trip, which, I don't know, I think it was maybe my favorite one too. This was out at Lax Creek, and just absolutely a gorgeous area. So you can connect with us at naba.redwood on Instagram, or send an email to nabaredwood@gmail.com, and I'll sign you up for the email list. I think our next event is going to be in April, where we're going to go look at some of these elfins out at Malel. Also, being creative. Art is science. I love this story about Maria Sibylla Marion. In the 1600s, she fell in love with insects. She was raising silkworm moths or the caterpillars, and then realized that they turned into moths. And it was because of her study, her observation, and the art that she did of these organisms that we learned that spontaneous generation isn't real, and that caterpillars turned into butterflies. Truly a hallmark of scientists. Like David Attenborough referred to her as one of the greatest entomologists of all time because of her observations and the art that she did. She went to Suriname and did amazing art. I mean, these are blue morphos, probably the other major iconic butterfly of the world. And it was her art that really showed people about this butterfly, what it could do, what its caterpillars ate, and those are the host plants. If you look at this art, even the way that the caterpillars have eaten the nibbles out of the plants are even representative of how the caterpillars actually do that in real life. So her attention to detail, absolutely unparalleled. The art that we do is communicative. It is science. Also, if you're doing butterfly art, I might recommend showcasing local butterflies. Here we have the redwood white that I mentioned earlier. It's our mascot for NABA Redwood. And this art was done by local artist Riley Gorman. Here's his Instagram if you're interested in checking out his art. What really drew me to him was that he depicts real organisms. His art is of a great blue heron or an American dipper, but in these surreal ways. So the art and expression is there, but the real organism is there too. And I just loved that. And so I really wanted him to be our artist that did our logo, and I couldn't be more happy. This is a redwood white on Cardamine angulata, a rare plant, which is what the caterpillars for this butterfly eat. And you can use your art for outreach. My colleague and good friend, Samantha Derenbacher, she just ran the Oregon Silver Spot Working Group over the past 2 days. So if you're watching, Sam, amazing job. She did these stickers last year, and it was the best thing about Pollinator Week. Chris and I were out there. At first, it was a bit hard to engage with people, but it's pretty difficult to say no to, hey, do you want a butterfly sticker? Once we whipped out the stickers, everybody was at our booth, So definitely an art is a great way to connect to people. In fact, butterflies are kind of the artworks of the insect world. They're good ambassadors for the rest of insects. You know, they hook you with their beauty, and as you dive deeper and deeper into the realm of insects, you find that there's a lot more beauty to explore. But those are things that we should do, but there's things that we should consider avoiding as well. One, avoiding seed mixes labeled wildflower mix. Wild to where? We don't know. We don't know where those seeds come from. They often are at the store, and it's like those plants, we don't have a good provenance. The genetic diversity of those can be messy. So I'd suggest avoiding these and avoid planting plants outside their native range. And, you know, I think this hits the hardest here for us locally, because lots of people want to do good things for butterflies. They know that planting milkweeds is good for monarchs, but planting milkweeds for monarchs on the coast may not always be the best thing. We want to make sure that you're planting those milkweeds within their native range. And so definitely there's no shame in planting milkweeds because you want to do good things for monarchs. But with the caveat that you realize that we don't have milkweeds growing in the fog belt. And so whenever those milkweeds are here, it may encourage a female monarch to lay their eggs on that milkweed. Those caterpillars hatch, but in the middle of what we would call August here, it never gets warm enough for those caterpillars to develop, and it creates a small sink for the butterfly. So my rule of thumb is if you already have native milkweeds growing around, then yeah, plant some more. Otherwise, plant food for the adults because they definitely need juice to get to the next spot. And consider planting your plant food for the other caterpillars as well. Also, I would highly recommend avoiding the purchase of mail order butterfly kits. These can spread pathogens. There's one called OE, which is a protozoan pathogen that can result in incomplete wing development that we see in this monarch. Also, raising those butterflies, it's unsure where they came from. So you may be muddying the genetics of your local butterflies, eroding those, local genetic adaptations. Also, it can be extremely stressful on the individuals. This is not their native habitat, you know. Although your bedroom might be extremely cozy for you, it's likely not for the butterfly. So I would encourage you to not order butterflies from the mail order kits. So here are some resources that you can use to learn more about butterfly biology, identification, and how you might do some plantings in your backyard. One, I'm in the middle of this one right now, but it's absolutely amazing. David James, he's an icon in the butterfly world. The Lives of Butterflies, this is part of a series of books. I also have the one on moths, and I'm learning a lot about butterfly biology. They have amazing illustrations. Highly recommend this book, as all of these actually. For Butterfly ID, this is going to be the best one for our area. Butterflies of the Pacific Northwest by Robert Pyle and Caitlin Labar. Robert Pyle, he's the guy that started the Xerxes Society, which is the nonprofit that really advocates a lot for insect conservation. But if I had to recommend only one of these resources, it's got to be this one. This might be my favorite book of all time. It's David James again and David Nunnally, and it's Life Histories of Cascadia Butterflies. What they did was they collected butterflies from all throughout the area, had them lay eggs, got a picture of the egg, raised all of them up, and then got pictures of each stage of the caterpillar development. So a caterpillar stage is called an instar. So sometimes there's 6, 8, sometimes 9 instars in some tropical butterflies, and they have pics of each one as it develops. Like, you cannot get this information online. This is just an amazing resource, and it's got a great bunch of butterfly biology and about our area in particular. But if you're interested in planting for adults, planting flowers in your backyard, pollinator.org/guides. You can come here, enter your zip code, and it'll give you a area-specific planting guide. So around here, this is the one that you want: mixed forest, redwood forest, Provence. But whenever you put in Arcata, which is where I'm at, it'll give you one for Siskiyou. So be cautious, you know, use some common sense on whenever you do that. But that's gonna, if it comes up with that one, that's gonna be the one that you want. But this guide is really, really incredible. This is from Calscape, and you're able to put in your location and the butterfly. So this is really essential. Get out in your backyard, see what butterflies that you have, because that's what you're going to want to plant for. let's say you're out in your backyard and you see some buckeyes, Junonia conea, common buckeye. You can put in your location, I'm in Arcata, so I put that there. And Plantego erecta, that's number one. That's what its caterpillars eat. So if you see buckeyes in your backyard, you can do this, and then it'll show you what are common food plants in your area. So that way you can know what you can use to feed your neighbors. So to wrap up, we can all make an impact, but we're going to make our greatest impact together. We have an amazing area already. Over 70 different species in Humboldt County, with some species that we know in decline are actually in abundance here. We're lucky. Let's maintain and protect the treasures that we have. And one of the best ways to do that is by planting flowers and caterpillar food. So whenever we come together with our neighbors to plant resources for these amazing bugs, we can cultivate some elfin magic in our backyards and really come together as a community to turn it into a little butterfly town. So with that, I gotta say thanks to so many people, everybody here. It wouldn't be possible without the great community that I have. And I got the resources up here too. I saw people taking pics, but this is going to be useful. So I'll take any questions that you might have. Lax Creek. Okay, you go out the 299 and then you turn north on Bear Road. There's a sign, little sign that say Lax Creek. Just follow the rest of the signs on the way there. But also go to blm.gov, search Lax Creek, and it'll give you directions on how to get there. Yeah, it's sort of the south end of the park. Brian.
I imagine that Scotch broom is an issue because it's taking up space that would usually be occupied by native plants. But are there other reasons why Scotch broom is an issue for butterflies?
Well, so butterflies, they move across the landscape, often in prairie systems, and Scotch broom is a pretty tall shrub. I would say that increases the friction that they have to move across the landscape. While it might provide some nectar resources, invasive plants are definitely known to be good nectar resources. We're unsure on what those dynamics really mean, in the long term, but really we want to make sure that the habitat's open so that the native plants that the caterpillars and butterflies rely on have enough space, and that the butterflies themselves aren't impeded as they move across that open space.
And it has nitrogen. Does that have nitrogen?
Yeah, it's a pea family plant, which are known nitrogen fixers into the soil, and that can really change the soil chemistry and result in the proliferation of other natives coming in. Thanks, Brian.
And when you do the survey and you say there's lesser numbers, is that because people are turning in less counts over time? One afternoon, if you scour an area, or how do you do that and know that number that?
So, it's different species to species. What I can speak to that I do a lot is working with the Oregon silver spot and Barren silver spot. The way that we know that those species are in decline is that we have established transects that we walk week after week in standardized ways. So we know that those are in decline because by maintaining that same coverage, we see that decline. In other butterflies, the ones that we have in our communities, many of those studies from Singapore and the UK, they have statistically rigorous analyses that they're doing to do that. Stuff that I don't understand, but it got peer reviewed and published. So I do have confidence in it, but that's why I would encourage everybody to use iNaturalist and NABA's butterflies I've seen to document the butterflies you see so that we can make sure that, we catch any declines early.
One other thing, I used to see a lot of swallowtail butterflies, like the yellow ones. I hardly see them anymore. Are they hybrid or they're not around or?
I've been here 7 years, so I haven't seen as much, I don't have as much, time behind me. But swallowtails, there's a few different kinds in our areas. The Western tiger is probably the one that is the biggest and most iconic. And I really don't know what's going on with it. I know that it's a strong flyer because it's a large butterfly. I don't think that they're migratory, but we also have anise swallowtails, ANISE. We see those out at the marsh a bunch because its caterpillars eat fennel, which is a non-native. So in that case, that's actually been pretty beneficial for the anise swallowtail. But we just need a lot more data to know what's going on, to take our anecdotal evidence and turn it into data.
Are you seeing climate change have an impact on where the plants are and then the knock-on effect on where the butterflies are?
I'd say the strongest impact that we see from climate change, speaking to the Barren silver spot, Oregon silver spot work that I do, those are listed species, is that the nectar plants, they're out in bloom in abundance, but it's almost now like that they're all crisping up before the butterflies emerge. And so that's really concerning for us because, there doesn't just need to be the caterpillar food, but there needs to be the caterpillar food and the adult food, and it's got to be blooming and available during the flight period. So I'd say that disarticulation between plant phenology and butterfly phenology is the thing that makes me the most nervous about the impacts of climate change. There was one question back there.
If I let my garden go, when should I whack down the weeds?
When should you whack down the weeds? I would say don't. And don't at my place either. We can talk about that later too, That's my landlord, Willie. I was actually going to talk to you about it. So whenever I saw you here today, I was like, oh, it's the perfect inn. I am gonna hey Willie, let's just let it grow. But it's important to let it grow and then to not rake too. Like lots of moth pupae stay in the leaf litter. So by raking that, it really it's disruptive of them at that non-feeding immobile stage. So sometimes people need some spots of their area mowed, no shade, but if you can afford to leave a few spots wild, let it happen.
Locally, are there any so-called bad butterflies or bad moths out there? Because I sometimes go for walks in places like England and I see certain times of the year that the caterpillars are just eating virtually everything in sight. And I don't know quite what to make of this. In your opinion, is that something like that? Is there such a thing as a bad butterfly or bad moth?
I don't think there's any such thing as a bad butterfly or bad moth, but maybe one's out of context. It's like definitely there are pestiferous moths. One of the best guides out there for moths is a Forest Service guide. And that's basically just to let all their foresters know what's eating their trees out there. But it's a really, really great guide. There's definitely some moths that are more pestiferous. And if you're growing brassicas like Brussels sprouts or kale in your garden, you might think that the cabbage white is also a bad butterfly because you'll see its caterpillars all on your plants.
Would you name some more plants? I put in some picnic myself, but I'd like to do butterflies like Arcata, for example.
Oh. I'd need to know sort of like where your area is, but one that I might recommend off the top of my head for the field crescent that I mentioned, its caterpillars eat the Pacific aster, Symphyotrichum chilens, and that flower grows in a lot of places. So and it's pretty. It's a nice purple little daisy flower that blooms in late summer. So I'd say that's a great one that wherever you are, it's probably going to help out the field crescents. But great to hear about your plant that can nickname.
Is it also called California aster?
I think so. Yeah. Thanks.
Fire presentation, beautiful pictures. And I have a comment that sort of addresses that, not really a question. But when you go to the California Native Plant Society, they have amazing signage that tell you which plants are good for butterflies. And they do a lot of research. Sometimes they have folks there that you can talk to about particular butterflies. And like Clint mentioned, Poweshiek is related. Use the toad and look up particular butterflies. But then I also wanted to point out, not everybody has a backyard, and butterflies are for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So even potted plants on the porch and going to community gardens can have really good impact too.
That's great points. And advocating to your at public meetings to be like, hey, we can put, native plants out there. And in fact, they're going to be, less maintenance than non-native ones. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Thanks so much for the comment and recommendation, Jenny.
So in general, is there an amount of life cycles that the butterflies, our local butterflies go through? And what do they do in the wintertime?
Oh, I love this question. And it's so particular by butterfly. So there's this concept in butterflies called voltinism, which that's how many times per year that they are an adult. The barren silver spot that Chris and I work with, it's univolting, one volt flight, one time per year where it's an adult that flies. So what's really surprising to people is that, like a butterfly is only a butterfly like 2 weeks of the year. So the other 50 weeks of the year, it's an egg, a caterpillar, or a pupa. And for our neighbor butterflies, they're just there, as an egg, a larva, or a pupa, eating away, or if they're pupa, not eating at all, just, sitting in their spot. Whereas other butterflies, like on the East Coast and in the Midwest, there's the Carner blue. That one famously is bivoltine. So it has this spring brood that comes in April, and then they lay their eggs. Those caterpillars hatch, eat, and then in the summer, boom, there's another crop of them. And then that second crop, they are the ones that overwinter. And then there's others that are multivolting, and that's going to be your cabbage whites around here that you can see almost all year long. They're just always eating and reproducing.
What kind of butterflies should we look forward to seeing in the near future?
Excellent question. So right now you can go over to the McKay Community Forest. I bet that those margined whites, those redwood whites, are probably out right now. Just walk down the hill and there's like a marshy area. That's where I saw them. Also, I was just out with our students this year working on the Kinnick brown elfin, and they're out. So on a nice, warm, not windy day, go out there and you'll be able to see the brown elfin and the western pine elfin. So 2 elfins one day, and I would say park at the north end of Malel, walk out the Keemoot Trail, and then you'll see a line of shore pines running north-south. Just stay on the inland side of that, walk up, and you're going to see lots of elfins.
Those little butterflies ever hybridize, or they definitely stay separate?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that there's a lot to learn about this. Almost certainly butterflies have hybridized in the past, and they continue to do so. I don't have a lot of evidence to say that some are and some are not. Biology is very fluid. So I'd say probably, and that's about as good an answer I can give you.
I'm just making an observation, being an old man. When I was a kid back in Milwaukee, there were huge fields here in the suburbs. And you just walk through the weeds, no weeds. Now, of course, it's all lawns and bushes. Yeah, it's all. Oh, I'm sure it's true.
Yeah, truly, I grew up in Missouri and, close to the swamps. And so we'd be like driving and people talk about this as like the windshield effect, is that used to back in the day, you'd drive around at night and then you would just have to clean lots of insects off your windshield afterwards. And now people's cars are staying spotless day after day and night after night. So we're definitely losing insects at an amazing rate, and it's very hard to quantify it.
Well, I wanted to pop in with 2 learning opportunities to piggyback on this too. So if you want to see Kinnick in action, we have some planted at the zoo, and a lot of our other native plants also have signs, so you can learn what plants are out there and what would be native for our area right here. And also, if you're a little intimidated about iNaturalist, I know we talked about it and how fun it is to use and what a great resource. We have a free workshop on how to use iNaturalist. We'll help you install it on your phone, learn how to use it. That's going to be on April 14th as part of our big Party for the Planet Earth Day celebration. So at the zoo on April 13th, we have a complimentary zoo day where we're partying for the planet. Then the 14th in the morning, we're going to get together to do a big free BioBlitz, and we'll teach you how to use that app. So then you can also use it for getting all this cool butterfly information too.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. That would all be great, especially for the Nava group, which are stickers back there and there to make sure that you get some of those before you leave.
Yeah, well, we just want to say thank you so much, Clint. This was amazing. Let's do much. We appreciate you coming out. Thanks so much for joining us for the series again this year. We love having you all at the zoo. Come back next year and come visit the zoo. Thanks so much. Awesome.